Welcome to the Kyero.com Spanish Property Podcast, where we interview people who recently purchased a home in Spain. They tell us what worked, what didn't, and what they'd do differently next time. I'm Beth Davison, and today I'm speaking with Hilary from Harpenden, who bought a house in Iznajar, Córdoba. Wanting to be immersed in Spanish life was a top priority for Hilary, as was some outdoor space with the property, and the hot tub, of course. Check out the show notes at kyero.com/podcast to find links and resources mentioned in this episode.
My name is Hilary. I've worked as a commercial manager in a company for the last 20 years. I'm also a Church of England Vicar. I'm largely retired now. My wife and I bought a house in Spain in 2015. It's just south of Iznajar, which means it's about an hour north of Malaga and an hour west of Granada. It's an old farmhouse, around 70 years old, I'd say. It's quite a large house, and the previous owner had converted some of the stables into 2 guest bedrooms and a very nice guest bathroom. And together with that part and a large store and workshop area, and the house itself, it sits on 3 sides of a courtyard, and the 4th side is closed off with a wall. So, it's a very nice place. It's very private in the courtyard, but at the same time we have garden round the house, and the whole plot is standing within a field of olive trees, just alongside a little track, which is, it's a kind of an earth and concrete track, and we're about 1.5 miles from our local village.
It sounds beautiful. That's a really lovely description of it. Thank you. And was it always the aim for you to have something with kind of so much outdoor space and so much land and a little bit more removed maybe from civilization?
You open a whole lot of questions there, Beth. First of all, we didn't set out to buy a house in Spain at all. Secondly, my wife Mareka is someone who likes to be near to a town, even better near to a city, and I'm someone who rather likes the country. So it's a good house for us, and it meets a lot of our needs. But we didn't quite set out to do this. It sort of happened by accident.
So explain more about that. What were you setting out to do, or were you not looking to buy abroad at all?
No, we were setting out to buy. Let me say this: because of the age that I am, in my early 60s, we were setting out to sell our townhouse north of London. Our children have left, so we don't need so much space, and buy a slightly smaller place out in the country in the UK. We found a house, and as time went by, we progressively didn't like it, or we liked it less and less. And my wife found it very cold. And in the end, we pulled out of the deal, which I've never done before and didn't like doing, but it was the right thing to do. Following that bizarre series of events, my wife continued to send me details of other houses that she was interested in, but actually I'd slightly lost the heart by then to go through the whole process again. And then I found the house which we subsequently bought in Spain. I thought it was a beautiful house. In fact, we both did. And so instead of going to look at houses in the UK one weekend, we flew out to Malaga and had a look at this house. And also, as we were there, we looked at some other houses. I think it's worth saying at this point that one of the problems with the house we would have bought in the country here in the UK was it was quite an old house. The ceilings were quite low and the windows were quite small.
Right. And
Mareka, my wife, prefers a house with high ceilings, big windows, and lots of light. So to arrive in Spain and find this marvellous farmhouse, a beautiful-looking house it is, with big windows and lots of sunlight, was something which hit a huge number of our hot buttons.
Yeah, of course.
And so we saw it on the Saturday. We went back on the Sunday without the estate agent, just had another look. And then we decided we wanted to buy it.
Lovely. And so by this point, you'd already been put in touch with a Spanish agent, yes?
We got through to Sunset Country Properties of Archidona. Their manager, Marcel Lohman, met us and took us to the house and showed us round. So, yes, we were in touch with an estate agent. And I think it's worth saying, actually, having bought the house, then, of course, you end up there and you don't know anyone. You don't know where to get anything. And Marcel Lohmann at Sunset Country Properties was superb in introducing us to an architect, to builders, to people who could look after the property in our absence, and just giving us those first footsteps into the local community.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I can imagine that being invaluable. And so at the point when, was it fairly easy to set up these viewings and kind of sort your first visit? Was that all pain-free?
Yeah, you mean when we first went to visit the house? Yes, it was extremely easy. I think we phoned them up and organised to go and see the house. And then I also phoned another Spanish estate agent who agreed to come and show us some other houses. So it was a very straightforward process. We flew into Malaga on a Friday night, stayed overnight in Malaga, and drove the following day up to this area, and that's where we met Marcel Lohmann.
And so you were seeing a handful of properties. Did any of the others appeal as much as the farmhouse that you went for, or was it love at first sight?
It was definitely love at first sight. There's no question. So it's easy to rationalise these things after the event, but I think the other houses didn't have as much to offer as this one did. This is a particularly well-positioned house. It has a beautiful view. It's a nice-looking house. But in comparison to the other two, for instance, it didn't have a swimming pool. So that was a bit of a concern, but I think we parked that concern because it was just such a lovely house.
Yeah. And presumably you could either build a pool or there are shared pools in the area that you can access. Like, I suppose you're deciding on your priorities.
Well, it's slightly more complicated than that because where the house is a protected area.
Ah.
Now, there's good and bad in this. The good is that no one else can build any property in that area. So there's one or two houses nearby where, I say nearby, there's nobody nearer than about 400 or 500 metres. But there's some properties where they're halfway through building when this law was brought in, so they can at their leisure finish their project. But it's not possible to build anything else. So it's good because it preserves our view, it preserves the beauty and the simplicity of the area and the quietness of the area. But it does mean that we can't build outside our footprint.
Yes.
And that means we can't build a swimming pool. We've got over that problem. And we're on the point of buying a hot tub,
Lovely.
a jacuzzi, which, of course, well, you can't swim in it, of course. But what you can do, you can sit in it in the cold water in the summer, but in the winter you can sit in it in the hot water.
Yeah, lovely.
So it's got other uses that I guess you could say a swimming pool wouldn't have. But no, you can't swim in it.
Yeah, no, totally. But it sounds like, so for when you kind of were going through these slightly limiting land laws and things like that, did you have someone helping and explaining all of the way through, or was a lot of this on your own research that you found out about the planning?
Now, we were very fortunate to have a good lawyer. And our lawyer was good in two respects. First of all, he's a local guy, but secondly, he's an Englishman. So he's been in Spain for maybe, 20 years or whatever. So he was very, very familiar with the legal position. Okay. But secondly, he was an Englishman, which meant it was very easy for us to ask and probe and dig and, because he understood where we were coming from and he understood what was the house buying process that we were familiar with. Secondly, our estate agent had introduced us to a very good architect who we asked to do a survey before we bought the house. The survey wasn't too bad. It pointed out some work that needed to be done. But the architect who did it was a local man from Iznajar, and he was able to fill us in on some of the very local regulations that would have an impact on us.
Fantastic. So you're building up the right contacts sort of all the way through, and having been through the slightly painful process in the UK then, which put you off buying or looking anymore in the UK, how did you find the Spanish system of buying comparatively?
When you stand back and look at it, I would say it was pretty straightforward because it was largely based on the same steps as buying a property in the UK. There are some differences, but we already had a property in the Netherlands. And so we'd gone through the Dutch process to buy a property, and the process by which you go and sit down with a lawyer and you meet the seller, and all of those things, which happen also in Spain, happen in Holland.
Right.
So being familiar with the UK process, and secondly, having gone through the process in the Netherlands, it really wasn't very complicated. And secondly, I think I would say there's a lot of information on the web. But if you just keep in your mind, it's basically the same process as in the UK, then okay, there's one or two little tweaky bits, a little bit different, but it's not like you're buying a property on the moon or something. This is basically the same process to be gone through.
Yeah. No, I think that sounds sensible. And when it came to budget and financing, obviously you're working in a different currency. How did you find that? How was your budget? Did you manage to stick to it? And did you get what you wanted for that amount of money?
We were, of course, in the stupid position, Beth, that we'd set out to buy a house in the UK. In order to buy the house in the UK, we would buy it before selling our existing house. So we'd set up a temporary mortgage. By the time the mortgage came through, we'd already pulled out of that house in the country in the UK. So by the time we came to look in Spain, we had a UK mortgage in place, but no house to buy. So in one sense, it was quite easy because the UK mortgage was a mortgage on our UK house. So we were remortgaging our existing home, or remortgaging a percentage of it. And the amount that we'd sought in the mortgage was plenty more than enough for what we would need in Spain.
And it didn't change things? Looking in a different country didn't change the criteria of you remortgaging?
No.
They were fine regardless of what you were going to spend that money on. It didn't
make any difference because we were remortgaging an existing property. What we chose to do with the money was not of interest to the bank. So they saw the existing house as the collateral, which of course it was. So obviously if we default on the mortgage, they would seize the existing house in the UK. The fact that we chose to buy a house in another country or in the UK or buy bottles of wine or diamonds was neither here nor there.
Great.
So I know other people take out a mortgage in Spain. My concern about that, which in fact has been borne out by fact, although I haven't known this, is of course if there's a massive currency shift, as there has been between the pound and the euro, had we taken out a mortgage in euros, and now the pound has dropped 20% against the euro, it would have proved very expensive. So we took out, the mortgage was in pounds, it was on a UK property, and it was, we needed considerably less than the amount we'd secured for the mortgage. So having got the mortgage, the first thing we did was to repay some of it. So that got us in the good books of the bank. What we then did, we then transferred the rest into euros. I guess, I'm going on memory here, but I guess we transferred probably about 40,000 more euros than what was required to buy the house. I'm very, very, very pleased we did that because we were buying euros at about 140 at that point. Today it's at 112. So that gave us plenty of money to do the building work or the renovations and so on that we needed to do on the house within the first year.
Yeah, which is perfect. So that all worked out really well. And do you mind me asking what your budget was for your house, for the farmhouse that you've got?
We bought the house for about 325,000 euros, which included all the furniture and cups and saucers and
oh, lovely.
things.
Okay. So it came furnished.
But we got 140 euros per pound. So it was a considerably better time than it is now.
Yeah, so, and you sound like you were quite savvy and quite aware of the exchange rate and the kind of currency. So would you say put some research into the financial side of things before you purchase anywhere?
I would say you've definitely got to understand, how the currencies move against each other. Things are very uncertain now, of course, and they will be uncertain certainly until the end of the Brexit transition period, is at the end of 2020. So I would be surprised if the pound was to improve against the euro in the next sort of 2 or 3 years, which is a shame, of course. We were fortunate. We hadn't known that the pound would nosedive. We were fortunate that we bought at a good rate. I think it's also worth saying that we didn't just go to the bank and change the money. We worked through an organisation that changes money for companies. I can give you the name. It was called MoneyCore. They're on the web, and they changed the money for us at a pretty good rate.
Right. Okay, great. So you were even researching to that level, which I think is very sensible.
Because you can lose or gain so much money when when you're moving, £300,000 or whatever.
Yeah.
You can just gain or lose a lot.
Yeah, totally. And so I think you got a great deal, but you also got a lot of land. And you mentioned the guest rooms, the stable conversion out at the back of your house. So who do you have to visit most kind of commonly? How do you use those? I'm assuming you don't ever let them. It's all kind of family and friends coming to see you.
On the subject of letting, we had at one time thought we might let. We don't do that for 2 reasons. The first is it appears to be the law in Spain that you can't let unless you've got certain facilities in place, particularly around heating and air conditioning. And we haven't got those facilities in place.
Right, okay.
And secondly, because one of the characteristics of an old farmhouse in the middle of the countryside is it's not quite a sort of plug-in villa on the coast. When you get there, you've got to check the water's coming out of the well and the gas bottles are plugged in correctly. And, it's not a very easy place just to plug in and go. So in answer to your question, yes, we've had friends and family going out there to stay. When we're in Spain, we tend to invite friends and family to come with us. We've had a lot of friends over the 2 or 3 years we've been there. It's just a really nice thing to do. It's lovely to spend time with one's friends and one's family and do fun things together. So it is great, and it's very nice having 2 well converted guest rooms.
Yeah, no, it sounds like it's a lovely setup. What ratio of time do you spend over there at the moment?
Well, it's interesting you ask that question because I've recently calculated this. Last year I spent about 22% of my time in Spain.
Okay, and then the rest of your time back in the UK or in the Netherlands? No,
I'm in the UK and partly in the Netherlands, but mainly in the UK. My wife is still working full-time, or largely full-time, so we're basically in the UK most of the time.
And do you foresee that kind of post-retirement or when work isn't kind of tying you to the UK so much that you'll spend more and more time in Spain, or will it always be a kind of a fifth of your time there?
I would think it will grow a bit. I don't think we'll move there permanently, but I think it will grow. So yeah, maybe 30-40%, something like that.
Lovely. It's great to have those options. And I just want to talk a little bit about the lifestyle lastly. What is it about the lifestyle in Spain that appeals to you?
Oh, where to start? Well, first of all, Beth, I have to say this. We're living an hour north of Malaga. It's a very different place from living by the coast. I've learned Spanish on and off for the last 30 years, one way and another, and I now realise why. Because to go into a restaurant in Nerja or Malaga or somewhere, I can do it all in English. If I open up in Spanish, they look at my blonde hair and respond to me in English anyway. But where we are, an hour north of Malaga, it's completely different. If I open in English, they look at me just, thoroughly confused. So everything is in Spanish. All of my contacts with the builder has been in Spanish. All of my contacts with local restaurants, shops, the place you buy tiles for the patio. Every time I order sand or cement, it's all in Spanish. So what appeals to me? I like very much the Spanish culture. I like the language. I like the written culture. I like the stories. And I like to talk to people. So for me, that's a huge buzz. I think something I hadn't quite anticipated was if you buy a farmhouse in the country, then all your neighbours are going to be farmers. it's logical, but I hadn't thought that through. We are surrounded by, 6, 7, 8 farms. We know very well 4 or 5 of the farming families. They are such nice people. They are thoroughly decent, good, honest, and very friendly people. I'm hugely blessed to have come across people like that. The fact that we can communicate directly with them is very enriching, because they are very keen to engage with us. So I think the quality of the people locally has been excellent. I like the landscape. It's very beautiful. We look out on the Subitica National Park. There's mountains, lakes. It's beautiful. I like the music. I like the shops. I like the history. I find it very, very enriching. And I should say that we've been to Andalusia probably on and off for our holidays over the last 20 years or so. So we've got to know that area quite well. But I think it's lovely. I like it. You can drive on the motorway without huge crowds of other cars.
Yeah, totally.
So I feel it's got a lot to offer. I think the public life in Spain, the municipal spaces, municipal parks and so on, are beautiful. And considering the economy is not so brilliant in Spain, I think they really do something very, very good with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm glad that you love it. I can hear in your voice how much you love it. There's so many things that you could list for me. When it comes to, my last question is just about giving advice to anyone thinking about doing what you've done. What would your top pieces of advice be for people wanting to buy in Spain?
Oh, right. I suppose first of all, exchange rate. Just understand about the money and the euro, because you can, as I say, you can gain a lot or lose a lot. Secondly, think about how you're going to use it ahead of time. We didn't do that really, and actually it's all worked out fine, but it might not have done. It was a shock for us suddenly to wake up and say, oh, we've actually got a house in Spain now. But how does that change our life? And it has changed our life. Thirdly, if you're going to be away from the coast, I think it's really important to get at least some Spanish. We've got neighbours who didn't have any Spanish and bought building works off a local supplier through Google Translate, and they had a lot of problems with that. Not because there was any ill intent on either side, but just because they weren't able to have the direct communication. Spanish is a very, very straightforward language. There's lots of provision for English people to learn it, and I just think it's worth taking that step quite seriously. The other thing is utilize your estate agent, because for us that was a big step to making the contacts with people, plumbers, electricians, architects, builders, whatever that we needed.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, that's all great advice. Thank you so much. I feel like there's a wealth of information there that people can dive into. But I'm glad it's gone so well, and I'm glad you're really enjoying owning a property over there, and that it seems to have worked out really great for both of you. And thank you for talking to me about it. That was perfect.
Okay, goodbye.
Thank you for listening, and thanks to Hilary for sharing his experiences. I love the sound of that hot tub, an excellent alternative if a property doesn't have the option of a swimming pool. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. This podcast is produced by Kyero.com, and our mission is to connect you with estate agents and properties throughout Spain. Whether your dream home is a rustic farmhouse surrounded by olive groves or a lock-up and leave apartment on the seafront, you'll find everything you need at Kyero.com. If you've enjoyed this episode, we'd really appreciate your 5-star rating on iTunes. It helps us reach and connect more people with their dream home in Spain. And whenever you're ready, here are 4 ways we can help you. Ask a question by emailing beth@kyero.com. We'll try and answer them all in an upcoming Q&A episode. Get a location guide also by emailing beth@kyero.com. We'll reply with the latest data and information on the areas you're interested in. Calculate your budget. Simply visit kyero.com/budget, enter 2 numbers, and you're done. Be our guest. If you've already purchased your home in Spain, we would love you to share your story on the podcast. Just email beth@kyero.com and we'll take it from there. Next week, it's the last in the season, and we have a special guest for you. Tune in to hear top tips from Mark, Sales and Marketing Director at Taylor Wimpey España. I'm Beth Davison, and you've been listening to the Kyero.com Spanish Property Podcast. I'll see you next week.